But I say that I know all the lands between the Shire and the Misty Mountains, for I have wandered over them for many years. I'm older than I look. I might prove useful. You will have to leave the open road after tonight, for the horsemen will watch it night and day. You may escape from Bree, and be allowed to go forward while the sun is up, but you won't get far. They will come on you in the wild, in some dark place, where there is no help. Do you wish them to find you? They are terrible. The hobbits looked at him, and saw with surprise that his face was drawn as if in pain, and his hands clenched the arms of his chair. The room was very quiet and still, and the light seemed to have grown dim. For a while he sat with unseeing eyes, as if walking in distant memory, or listening to sounds in the night far away. There, he cried after a moment, drawing his hand across his brow. Perhaps I know more of these pursuers than you do. You fear them, but you do not fear them enough yet. Tomorrow you will have to escape if you can. Strider can take you by paths that are seldom tread. Will you have him? There was a heavy silence. Frodo made no answer. His mind was confused with fear and doubt. Sam frowned and looked at his master, and at last he broke out. With your leave, Mr. Frodo, I say no. This Strider here, he warns and he says take care, and I say yes to that. But let's begin with him. He comes out of the wild. I never heard no good of such folk. He knows something, that's plain, and more than I like. But it's no reason why we should let him go leading us out into some dark place far from help, as he puts it. Pippin fidgeted and looked uncomfortable. Strider did not reply to Sam, but turned his keen eyes on Frodo. Frodo caught his glance and looked away. No, he said slowly, I don't agree. I think you are not really as you choose to look. You began to talk to me like the Bree folk, but your voice has changed. Still, Sam seems right in this. I don't see why you should warn us to take care, and yet ask us to take you on trust. Why the disguise? Who are you? What do you really know about my business? And how do you know it? The lesson in caution is well learned, said Strider with a grim smile. But caution is one thing, and wavering is another. You will not get to Rivendell now on your own, and to trust me is your only chance. You must make up your mind. I will answer some of your questions, if that will help you to do so. But why should you believe my story, if you do not trust me already? Still, here it is. At that moment there came a knock at the door. Mr. Butterbur had arrived with candles, and behind him was Nob with cans of hot water. Strider withdrew into a dark corner. I've come to bid you good night, said the landlord, putting the candles on the table. Nob, take the water to the rooms. He came in and shut the door. It's like this, he began, hesitating and looking troubled. If I've done any harm, I'm sorry indeed. But one thing drives out another, as you'll admit, and I'm a busy man. But first, one thing and then another this week has jogged my memory, as the saying goes. Not too late, I hope. You see, I was asked to look out for hobbits of the Shire, and for one by the name of Baggins in particular. And what has that got to do with me? Asked Frodo. Ah, you know best, said the landlord knowingly. I won't give you away, but I was told that this Baggins would be going by the name of Underhill, and I was given a description that fits you well enough, if I may say so. Indeed, well, let's have it then, said Frodo, unwisely interrupting. A stout little fellow with red cheeks, said Mr. Butterbur solemnly. Pippin chuckled, but Sam looked indignant. That won't help you much. It goes for most hobbits, Barley, he says to me, continued Mr. Butterbur with a glance at Pippin. But this one is taller than some and fairer than most, and he has a cleft in his chin. Perky chap with a bright eye. Begging your pardon, but he said it, not me. He said it? And who is he? Asked Frodo eagerly. Ah, that was Gandalf, if you know who I mean. A wizard, they say he is, but a good friend of mine, whether or no. But now I don't know what he'll have to say to me if I see him again. Turn all my ale sour and me into a block of wood, I shouldn't wonder. He's a bit hasty. Still, what's done can't be undone. Well, what have you done? Said Frodo, getting impatient with the slow unravelling of Buttimer's thoughts. Where was I? Said the landlord, pausing and snapping his fingers. Ah, yes, old Gandalf. 3 months back, he walked right into my room without a knock. Barley, he says, I'm off in the morning. Will you do something for me? You've only to name it, said I. I'm in a hurry, said he, and I've no time myself, but I want a message took to the Shire. Have you anyone you can send and trust to go? I can find someone, I said, tomorrow maybe, or the day after. Make it tomorrow, he says, and then he gave me a letter. It's addressed plain enough, said Mr. Buttimer, producing a letter from his pocket and reading out the address slowly and proudly. He valued his reputation as a lettered man. Mr. Frodo Baggins, Bag End, Hobbiton, in the Shire. A letter from me from Gandalf? Cried Frodo. Ah, said Mr. Buttimer, then your right name is Baggins. It is, said Frodo, and you had better give me that letter at once and explain why you never sent it. That's what you came to tell me, I suppose, though you've taken a long time to come to the point. Poor Mr. Buttimer looked troubled. You're right, master, he said, and I beg your pardon. And I'm mortal afraid of what Gandalf will say, if harm comes of it. But I didn't keep it back on purpose. I put it safe. Then I couldn't find nobody willing to go to the Shire the next day nor the day after. None of my own folk were to spare, and then one thing after another drove it out of my mind. I'm a busy man. I'll do what I can to set matters right. And if there's any help I can give, you've only to name it. Leaving the letter aside, I promised Gandalf no less. Barley, he says to me, this friend of mine from the Shire, he may be coming out this way before long, him and another. He'll be calling himself Underhill, mind that. But you need ask no questions. And if I'm not with him, he may be in trouble, and he may need help. Do whatever you can for him, and I'll be grateful, he says. And here you are. The trouble's not far off, seemingly. What do you mean? Asked Frodo. Oh, these black men, said the landlord, lowering his voice. They're looking for Baggins, and if they mean well, then I'm a hobbit. It was on Monday. All the dogs were yammering and the geese screaming. Uncanny, I called it. Nob, he came and told me that 2 black men were at the door asking for a hobbit called Baggins. Nob's hair was all stood on end. I bid the black fellows be off and slammed the door on 'em, but they've been asking the same question all the way to Arquette, I fear. And that ranger, Strider, he's been asking questions too. Tried to get in here to see you before you've had a bite or sup, he did. He did, said Strider suddenly, coming forward into the light, and much trouble would have been saved if you had let him in, Barliman. The landlord jumped with surprise. You, he cried, you're always popping up. What do you want now? He's here with my leave, said Frodo. He came to offer me his help. Well, you know your own business, maybe, said Mr. Buttimer, looking suspiciously at Strider. But if I was in your plight, I wouldn't take up with a ranger. Who would you take up with, then? Said Strider. A fat innkeeper who only remembers his own name because people shouted at him all day? They cannot stay in the pony forever, and they cannot go home. They have a long road before them. Will you go with them and keep the black men off? Me? Leave Bree? Well, I wouldn't do that for any money, said Mr. Buttimer, looking really scared. But why can't you stay here quiet for a bit, Mr. Underhill? What are all these queer goings-on? What are these black men after, and where do they come from, I'd like to know? I'm sorry, I can't explain it all, answered Frodo. I'm tired and very worried, and it's a long tale. But if you mean to help me, I ought to warn you that you will be in danger. as long as I am in your house. These Black Riders, I'm not sure, but I fear they come from... They come from Mordor, said Strider in a low voice. From Mordor, Barliman, if that means anything to you. Save us! Cried Mr. Buttimer, turning pale. The name evidently was known to him. That's the worst news that has come to Bree in my time. It is, said Frodo. Are you still willing to help me? I am, said Mr. Buttimer, more than ever. Though I don't know what the likes of me can do against... He faltered. Against the shadow in the east, said Strider quietly. Not much, Barliman, but every little bit helps. You can let Mr. Underhill stay here tonight, as Mr. Underhill, and you can forget the name of Baggins till he is far away. I'll do that, said Buttimer, but they'll find out he's here without help from me, I'm afraid. It's a pity Mr. Baggins drew attention to himself this evening, to say no more. That story of Mr. Bilbo's going off has been heard before tonight in Bree. Even our Nob has been doing some guessing in his slow pate, and there are others in Bree quicker in the uptake than he is. Well, we can only hope the riders won't come back yet, said Frodo. I hope not indeed, said Buttimer. But spooks or no spooks, they won't get in the pony so easy. Don't you worry till the morning. Nob'll say no word. No black man'll pass my doors, where I can stand on my legs. Me and my folks will keep watch tonight, but you'd better get some sleep if you can. In any case, we must be called at dawn, said Frodo. We must get off as early as possible. Breakfast at 6:30, please. Right, I'll see to the orders, said the landlord. Good night, Mr. Baggins. Underhill. I should say. Good night. Now bless me. Where's your Mr. Brandybuck? I don't know, said Frodo with sudden anxiety. They'd forgotten all about Mary, and it was getting late. I am afraid he is out. He said something about going for a breath of air. Well, you do want looking after, and no mistake. Your party might be on a holiday, said Buttimer. I must go and bar the doors quick, but I'll see your friend is let in when he comes. I better send Nob out to look for him. Good night to y'all. At last Mr. Buttimer went out, with another doubtful look at Strider and a shake of his head. His footsteps retreated down the passage. Well, said Strider, when are you going to open that letter? Frodo looked carefully at the seal before he broke it. It seemed certainly to be Gandalf's. Inside, written in the wizard's strong but graceful script, was the following message. The Prancing Pony, Bree, Mid-Year's Day, Shire Year, 1418. Dear Frodo, bad news has reached me here. I must go off at once. You had better leave Bag End soon, and get out of the Shire before the end of July at latest. I will return as soon as I can, and I will follow you if I find that you are gone. Leave a message for me here, if you pass through Bree. You can trust the landlord, Buttimer. You may meet a friend of mine on the road, a man, lean, dark, tall, by some called Strider. He knows our business and will help you. Make for Rivendell. There I hope we may meet again. If I do not come, Elrond will advise you. Yours in haste, Gandalf. P.S. Do not use it again, for any reason whatever. Do not travel by night. P.P.S. Make sure that it is the real Strider. There are many strange men on the roads. His true name is Aragorn. All that is gold does not glitter. Not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither. Deep roots are not reached by the frost. From the ashes a fire shall be woken. A light from the shadows shall spring. Renewed shall be the blade that was broken, and crownless again shall be king. P.P.P.S. I hope Buttimer sends this promptly. A worthy man, but his memory is like a lumber room. Things wanted always buried. If he forgets, I shall roast him. Farewell. Frodo read the letter to himself and then passed it to Pippin and Sam. Really, old Buttimer has made a mess of things, he said. He deserves roasting. If I had got this at once, we might all have been safe in Rivendell by now. But what can have happened to Gandalf? He writes as if he were going into great danger. He's been doing that for many years, said Strider. Frodo turned and looked at him thoughtfully, wondering about Gandalf's second postscript. Why didn't you tell me you were Gandalf's friend at once? He asked. It would have saved time. Would it? Would any of you have believed me until now? Said Strider. I knew nothing of this letter. For all I knew, I had to persuade you to trust me without proofs, if I was to help you. In any case, I did not intend to tell you all about myself at once. I had to study you first and make sure of you. The enemy has set traps for me before now. As soon as I had made up my mind, I was ready to tell you whatever you asked. But I must admit, he added with a clear laugh, that I hoped you would take me for my own sake. A hunted man sometimes wearies of distrust and longs for friendship, but there I believe my looks are against me. They are, at first sight at any rate, laughed Pippin with another relief after reading Gandalf's letter. What handsome is as handsome does, as we say in the Shire, and I dare say we shall all look much the same after lying for days in hedges and ditches. It would take more than a few days or weeks or years wandering in the wild to make you look like Strider, he answered. And you would die first, unless you were made of sterner stuff than you look to be. Pippin subsided, but Sam was not daunted, and he still eyed Strider dubiously. How do we know that you are the Strider that Gandalf speaks about? He demanded. You never mentioned Gandalf till this letter came out. You might be a play-acting spy, for all I can see, trying to get us to go on with you. You might have done in the real Strider and took his clothes. What have you to say to that? You are a stout fellow, answered Strider, but I am afraid my only answer to you, Sam Gamgee, is this. If I had killed the real Strider, I could kill you, and I should have killed you already without so much talk. If I was after the ring, I could have it, now. He stood up and suddenly seemed to grow taller. In his eyes gleamed a light, keen and commanding. Throwing back his cloak, he laid his hand on the hilt of a sword that had hung concealed by his side. They did not dare to move. Sam sat wide-mouthed, staring at him dumbly. But I am the real Strider, fortunately, he said, looking down at them, with his face softened by a sudden smile. I am Aragorn, son of Arathorn, and if by life or death I can save you, I will. There was a long silence. At last Frodo spoke with hesitation. I believe that you were a friend before the letter came, he said, or at least I wished to. You have frightened me several times tonight, but never in the way that servants of the enemy would, or so I imagine. I think one of his spies would, well, seem fairer and feel fouler, if you understand. I see, laughed Strider. I look foul and feel fair. Is that it? All that is gold does not glitter. Not all those who wander are lost. Did the verses apply to you, then? Asked Frodo. I could not make out what they were about. But how did you know they were in Gandalf's letter, if you'd never seen it? I did not know, he answered. But I am Aragorn, and those verses go with that name. He drew out his sword, and they saw that the blade was indeed broken a foot below the hilt. Not much use, is it, Sam? Said Strider. But the time is near when it shall be forged anew. Sam said nothing. Well, said Strider, with Sam's permission we will call that settled. Strider will be your guide. We shall have a rough road tomorrow, even if we are allowed to leave Bree unhindered. We can hardly hope now to leave it unnoticed. But I shall try to get lost as soon as possible. I know one or two ways out of the Bree land other than the main road. If once we shake off pursuit, I shall make for Weathertop. Weathertop, said Sam. What's that? It is a hill just to the north of the road, about halfway from here to Rivendell. It commands a wide view all round, and there we shall have a chance to look about us. Gandalf will make for that point if he follows us. After Weathertop, our journey will become more difficult, and we shall have to choose between various dangers. When did you last see Gandalf? Asked Frodo. Do you know where he is? or what he is doing." Strider looked grave. "I do not know," he said. "I came west with him in the spring. I have often kept watch on the borders of the Shire in the last few years, when he was busy elsewhere. He seldom left it unguarded. We last met on the 1st of May at Sarn Ford down the Brandywine. He told me that his business with you had gone well, and that you would be starting for Rivendell in the last week of September. As I knew he was at your side, I went away on a journey of my own, and that has proved ill, for plainly some news reached him, and I was not at hand to help. I am troubled for the first time since I've known him. We should have had messages, even if he could not come himself. When I returned many days ago, I heard the ill news. The tidings had gone far and wide that Gandalf was missing, and that the horsemen had been seen. It was the elven folk of Gildor that told me this, and later they told me that you had left your home, but there was no news of your leaving Buckland. I've been watching the East Road anxiously." "Do you think the Black Riders have anything to do with it? With Gandalf's absence, I mean," asked Frodo. "I do not know of anything else that could have hindered him, except the enemy himself," said Strider. "But do not give up hope. Gandalf is greater than you Shire folk know. As a rule, you can only see his jokes and toys. But this business of ours will be his greatest task." Pippin yawned. "I am sorry," he said, "but I am dead tired. In spite of all the danger and worry, I must go to bed, or sleep where I sit. Where does that silly fellow Merry? It would be the last straw if we had to go out in the dark and look for him." At that moment they heard a door slam. Then feet came running along the passage. Merry came in with a rush, followed by Nob. He shut the door hastily and leaned against it. He was out of breath. They stared at him in alarm for a moment before he gasped. "I've seen them, Frodo. I've seen them. Black Riders." "Black Riders?" cried Frodo. "Where?" Here, in the village. I stayed indoors for an hour. Then, as you did not come back, I went out for a stroll. I'd come back in again and was standing just outside the light of the lamp, looking at the stars. Suddenly, I shivered and felt that something horrible was creeping near. There was a sort of deeper shade among the shadows across the road, just beyond the edge of the lamplight. It slid away at once into the dark without a sound. There was no horse. "Which way did it go?" asked Strider suddenly and sharply. Merry started, noticing the stranger for the first time. "Go on," said Frodo. "This is a friend of Gandalf's. I will explain later." "It seemed to make off up the road eastward," continued Merry. "I tried to follow. Of course, it vanished almost at once, but I went round the corner and on as far as the last house on the road." Strider looked at Merry with wonder. "You have a stout heart," he said, "but it was foolish." "I don't know," said Merry. "Neither brave nor silly, I think. I couldn't hardly help myself. I seemed to be drawn somehow. Anyway, I went, and suddenly I heard voices by the hedge. One was muttering, the other was whispering or hissing. I couldn't hear a word that was said. I did not creep any closer because I began to tremble all over. Then I felt terrified. I turned back and was just going to bolt home when something came behind me and I fell over." I found him, sir," put in Nob. "Mr. Butler sent me out with a lantern. I went down to Westgate and then back up towards Southgate. Just nigh Bill Ferny's house, I thought I could see something in the road. I couldn't swear to it, but it looked to me as if two men was stooping over something, lifting it. I gave a shout, but when I got up to the spot, there was no sign of him, and only Mr. Brandywine lying in the road. He seemed to be asleep. I thought I had fallen into deep water, he says to me, when I shook him. Very clear he was, and as soon as I had roused him, he got up and ran back here like a hare." "I am afraid that's true," said Mary, "though I don't know what I said. I had an ugly dream which I can't remember. I went to pieces. I don't know what came over me." "I do," said Strider. "The Black Breath. The riders must have left their horses outside and passed back through the south gate in secret. They will know all the news now, for they have visited Bill Fernie, and probably that southerner was a spy as well. Something may happen in the night, before we leave, Bree." "What will happen?" said Mary. "Will they attack the inn?" "No, I think not," said Strider. "They are not all here yet, and in any case that is not their way. In dark and loneliness they are strongest. They will not openly attack a house where there are lights and many people, not until they are desperate, not while all the long leagues of Eodor still lie before us. But their power is in terror, and already some in Bree are in their clutch. They will drive these wretches to some evil work, Fernie, some of the strangers, and maybe the gatekeeper too. They had words with Harry at the west gate on Monday. I was watching them. He was white and shaking when they left him." "We seem to have enemies all round," said Frodo. "What are we to do?" "Stay here and do not go to your rooms. They are sure to have found out which those are. The hobbit rooms have windows looking north and close to the ground. We'll all remain together and bar this window and the door. But first Nob and I will fetch your luggage." While Strider was gone, Frodo gave Merry a rapid account of all that had happened since supper. Merry was still reading and pondering Gandalf's letter when Strider and Nob returned. "Well, master," said Nob, "I've ruffled up the clothes and put a bolster down the middle of each bed. And I made a nice imitation of your head with a brown woolen mat, Mr. Underhill, sir," he added with a grin. Pippin laughed. "Very lifelike," he said. "But what will happen when they have penetrated the disguise?" "We shall see," said Strider. "Let us hope to hold the fort until morning." "Good night to you," said Nob, and went off to take his part and watch on the doors. Their bags and gear they piled on the parlor floor. They pushed a low chair against the door and shut the window. Peering out, Frodo saw that the night was still clear. The sickle was swinging bright above the shoulders of Bree Hill. He then closed and barred the heavy inside shutters and drew the curtains together. Strider built up the fire and blew out all the candles. The hobbits lay down on their blankets, with their feet toward the hearth, but Strider settled himself in the chair against the door. They talked for a little, for Merry still had several questions to ask. "Jumped over the moon," chuckled Merry as he rolled himself in his blanket. "Very ridiculous of you, Frodo, but I wish I had been there to see. The worthies of B will be discussing it for 100 years hence." "I hope so," said Strider. Then they all fell silent, and one by one the hobbits dropped off to sleep. Chapter 11. A Knife in the Dark. As they prepared for sleep in the inn at Bree, darkness lay on Buckland. A mist strayed in the dells and along the river bank. The house at Crick Hollow stood silent. Fatty Bulger opened the door cautiously and peered out. A feeling of fear had been growing on him all day, and he was unable to rest or to go to bed. There was a brooding threat in the breathless night air. As he stared out into the gloom, a black shadow moved under the trees. The gate seemed to open of its own accord and close again without a sound. Terror seized him. He shrank back, and for a moment he stood trembling in the hall. Then he shut and locked the door. The night deepened. There came the soft sound of horses led with stealth along the lane. Outside the gate they stopped, and 3 black figures entered, like shades of night creeping across the ground. One went to the door, one to the corner of the house on either side, and there they stood, as still as the shadows of stones, while night went slowly on. The house and the quiet trees seemed to be waiting breathlessly. There was a faint stir in the leaves, and a cock crowed far away. The cold hour before dawn was passing. A figure by the door moved. In the dark, without moon or stars, a drawn blade gleamed, as if a chill light had been unsheathed. There was a blow, soft but heavy, and the door shuddered. "Open in the name of Mordor," said a voice, thin and menacing. At a second blow, the door yielded and fell back, with timbers burst and lock broken. The black figures passed swiftly in. At that moment, among the trees nearby, a horn rang out. It rent the night like fire on a hilltop. Awake! Fear! Fire! Foes! Awake! Fatty Bulwer had not been idle. As soon as he saw the dark shapes creep from the garden, he knew that he must run for it or perish. And run he did, out of the back door, through the garden, and over the fields. When he reached the nearest house, more than a mile away, he collapsed on the doorstep. "No, no, no!" he was crying. "No, not me! I haven't got it!" It was some time before anyone could make out what he was babbling about. At last they got the idea that enemies were in Buckland, some strange invasion from the old forest, and then they lost no more time. Fear! Fire! Foes! The brandy bucks were blowing the horn call of Buckland that had not been sounded for 100 years, not since the white wolves came in the fell winter, when the brandywine was frozen over. Awake! Awake! Far away, answering horns were heard. The alarm was spreading. The black figures fled from the house. One of them let fall a hobbit cloak on the step as he ran. In the lane the noise of hoofs broke out, and gathering to a gallop went hammering away into the darkness. All about Crick Hollow there was the sound of horns blowing, and voices crying, and feet running. But the black riders rode like a gale to the north gate. Let the little people blow. Sauron will deal with them later. Meanwhile they had another errand. They knew now that the house was empty, and the ring had gone. They rode down the guards at the gate and vanished from the Shire. In the early night Frodo woke from a deep sleep, suddenly, as if some sound or presence had disturbed him. He saw that Strider was sitting alert in his chair. His eyes gleamed in the light of the fire, which had been tended and was burning brightly, but he made no sign or movement. Frodo soon went to sleep again, but his dreams were again troubled with the noise of wind and the galloping of hoofs. The wind seemed to be curling round the house and shaking it, and far off he heard a horn blowing wildly. He opened his eyes and heard a cock crowing lustily in the inn-yard. Strider had drawn the curtains and pushed back the shutters with a clang. The first grey light of day was in the room, and a cold air was coming through the open window. As soon as Strider had roused them all, he led the way to their bedrooms. When they saw them, they were glad that they had taken his advice. The windows had been forced open and were swinging, and the curtains were flapping. The beds were tossed about, and the bolsters slashed and flung upon the floor. The brown mat was torn to pieces. Strider immediately went to fetch the landlord. Poor Mr. Butterbur looked sleepy and frightened. He had hardly closed his eyes all night, so he said, but he had never heard a sound. "Never has such a thing happened in my time," he cried, raising his hands in horror. "Guests unable to sleep in their beds, and good bolsters ruined and all. What are we coming to?" "Dark times," said Strider. "But for the present you may be left in peace when you've got rid of us. We will leave at once. Never mind about breakfast. A drink and a bite standing will have to do. We shall be packed in a few minutes." Mr. Butterbur hurried off to see that their ponies were got ready, and to fetch them a bite. But very soon he came back in dismay. The ponies had vanished. The stable doors had all been opened in the night, and they were gone. Not only Mary's ponies, but every other horse and beast in the place. Frodo was crushed by the news. How could they hope to reach Rivendell on foot, pursued by mounted enemies? They might as well set out for the moon. Strider sat silent for a while, looking at the hobbits, as if he was weighing up their strength and courage. "Ponies would not help us to escape horsemen," he said at last, thoughtfully, as if he guessed what Frodo had in mind. "We should not go much slower on foot, not on the roads I mean to take. I was going to walk in any case. It is the food and stores that trouble me. We cannot count on getting anything to eat between here and Rivendell, except what we take with us, and we ought to take plenty to spare, for we may be delayed, or forced to go round about, far out of the direct way. How much are you prepared to carry on your backs? As much as we must, said Pippin, with a sinking heart, but trying to show that he was tougher than he looked or felt. I can carry enough for two, said Sam defiantly. Can't anything be done, Mr. Butterbur? Asked Frodo. Can't we get a couple of ponies in the village, or even one just for the baggage? I don't suppose we could hire them, but we might be able to buy them, he added doubtfully, wondering if he could afford it. I doubt it, said the landlord unhappily. The 2 or 3 riding ponies that there were in Bree were stabled in my yard, and they're gone. As for other animals, horses or ponies for draught or whatnot, there are very few of them in Bree. They won't be for sale. But I'll do what I can. I'll ride out Bob and send him round as soon as maybe. Yes, said Strider reluctantly. You had better do that. I'm afraid we shall have to try to get one pony at least. But so ends all hopes of starting early and slipping away quietly. We might as well have blown a horn to announce our departure. That was part of their plan, no doubt. There is one crumb of comfort, said Mary. And more than a crumb, I hope. We can have breakfast while we wait and sit down to it. Let's get a hold of Nob. In the end, there were more than 3 hours' delay. Bob came back with the report that no horse or pony was to be got for love or money in the neighborhood, except one. Bill Ferny had one that he might possibly sell. A poor old half-starved creature it is, said Bob, but he won't part with it for less than twice its worth, seeing how you're placed. Not if I knows Bill Ferny. Bill Ferny, said Frodo. Isn't there some trick? Wouldn't the beast bolt back to him with all our stuff, or help in tracking us or something? No, I wonder, said Strider, but I cannot imagine any animal running home to him once it got away. I fancy this is only an afterthought of kind Master Ferny's, just a way of increasing his profits from the affair. The chief danger is that the poor beast is probably at death's door. But there does not seem to be any choice. What does he want for it? Bill Ferny's price was 12 silver pennies, and that was indeed at least 3 times a pony's values in those parts. It proved to be a bony, underfed, and dispirited animal, but it did not look like dying just yet. Mr. Butterbur paid for it himself, and offered Mary another 18 pence as some compensation for the lost animals. He was an honest man, and well off as things are reckoned in Bree, but silver 30 pennies was a sore blow to him, and being cheated by Bill Ferny made it harder to bear. As a matter of fact, he came out on the right side in the end. It turned out later that only one horse had actually been stolen. The others had been driven off, or had bolted in terror and were found wandering in different corners of the Breeland. Mary's ponies had escaped altogether, and eventually, having a good deal of sense, they made their way to the downs in search of Fatty Lumpkin. So they came under the care of Tom Bombadil for a while, and were well off. But when news of the events at Bree came to Tom's ears, he sent them to Mr. Butterbur, who thus got 5 good beasts at a very fair price. They had to work harder in Bree, but Bob treated them well. So on the whole, they were lucky. They missed a dark and dangerous journey, but they never came to Rivendell. However, in the meanwhile, for all Mr. Butterbur knew, his money was gone for good, or for bad. And he had other troubles, for there was a great commotion as soon as the remaining guests were astir and heard news of the raid on the inn. The southern travelers had lost several horses and blamed the innkeeper loudly, until it became known that one of their own number had also disappeared in the night, none other than Bill Ferny's squint-eyed companion. Suspicion fell on him at once. If you pick up with a horse thief and bring him to my house, said Butterbur angrily, you ought to pay for all the damage yourself and not come shouting at me. Go ask Ferny where your handsome friend is. But it appeared that he was nobody's friend, and nobody could recollect when he had joined their party. After their breakfast, the hobbits had to repack and get together further supplies for the longer journey they were now expecting. It was close on 10 o'clock before they at last got off. By that time, the whole of Bree was buzzing with excitement. Frodo's vanishing trick, the appearance of the Black Horseman, the robbing of the stables, and not least the news that Strider the Ranger had joined the mysterious hobbits, made such a tale as would last for many uneventful years. Most of the inhabitants of Bree and Straddle, and many even from Combe and Arquette, were crowded in the road to see the travellers start. The other guests in the inn were at the doors or hanging out of windows. Strider had changed his mind, and he decided to leave Bree by the main road. Any attempt to set off across country at once would only make matters worse. Half the inhabitants would follow them to see what they were up to, and to prevent them from trespassing. They said farewell to Nob and Bob, and took leave of Mr. Butterbur with many thanks. "I hope we shall meet again some day, when things are merry once more," said Frodo. "I should like nothing better than to stay in your house in peace for a while." They tramped off, anxious and downhearted, under the eyes of the crowd. Not all the faces were friendly, nor all the words that were shouted, but Strider seemed to be held in awe by most of the Breelanders, and those that he stared at shut their mouths and drew away. He walked in front with Frodo. Next came Merry and Pippin, and last came Sam leading the pony, which was laden with as much of their baggage as they had the heart to give it. But already it looked less dejected, as if it approved of the change in its fortunes. Sam was chewing an apple thoughtfully. He had a pocketful of them, a parting present from Nob and Bob. "Apples for walking and a pipe for sitting," he said, "but I reckon I'll miss them both before long." The hobbits took no notice of the inquisitive heads that peered out of doors, or popped over walls and fences as they passed. But as they drew near to the further gate, Frodo saw a dark, ill-kept house behind a thick hedge, the last house in the village. In one of the windows he caught a glimpse of a sallow face with sly, slanting eyes, but it vanished at once. "So that's where the southerner is hiding," he thought. "He looks more than half like a goblin." Over the hedge another man was staring boldly. He had heavy black brows and dark, scornful eyes. His large mouth curled in a sneer. He was smoking a short black pipe. As they approached, he took it out of his mouth and spat. "Morning, Longshanks," he says. "Off early? Found some friends at last." Strider nodded, but he did not answer. "Morning, my little friends," he said to the others. "I suppose you know who you're taken up with. That Stick-it-not Strider, that is, though I've heard other names not so pretty. Watch out tonight. And you, Sammy, don't go ill-treating my poor old pony. Pah!" He spat again. Sam turned quickly. "And you, Fernie," he said, "put your ugly face out of sight, or it'll get hurt." With a sudden flick, quick as lightning, an apple left his hand and hit Bill square on the nose. He ducked too late, and curses came from behind the hedge. "Waste of a good apple," said Sam regretfully, and strode on. At last they left the village behind. The escort of children and stragglers that had followed them got tired and turned back at the south gate. Passing through, they kept on along the road for some miles. It bent to the left, curving back to its eastward line as it rounded the feet of Bree Hill, and then it began to run swiftly downwards into wooded country. To their left they could see some of the houses and hobbit holes of Straddle, and on the gentler southeastern slopes of the hill, down in the deep hollow away north of the road, there were wisps of rising smoke that showed where Combe lay. Arquette was hidden in the trees beyond. After the road had run down some way, and had left Bree Hill, standing tall and brown behind, they came on a narrow track that led off north. "This is where we leave the open and take to cover," said Strider. "Not a shortcut, I hope," said Pippin. "Our last shortcut through the woods nearly ended in disaster." "Ah, but you had not got me with you then," laughed Strider. "My cuts, short or long, don't go wrong." He took a look up and down the road. No one was in sight, and he led the way quickly down toward the wooded valley. His plan, as far as they could understand it without knowing the country, was to go toward Arquette at first, but to bear right, and pass it on the east, and then to steer as straight as he could over the wild lands to Weathertop Hill. In that way they would, if all went well, cut off a great loop of the road, which further on bent southwards to avoid the Midgewater marshes. But of course, they would have to pass through the marshes themselves, as Strider's description of them was not encouraging.